So now, in the year of 2023, if you're a gamer, you can also be a photographer. They apparently go hand in hand these days. And it's all because of the feature we all know as photo mode. So I'm not gonna lie, I'm actually not a photographer. Like at all. But I am a huge gamer. I love video games. I've been playing them all my life since I was a kid. But who would have thought modern day video game devs would have combined the two and allow you to flex your photography skills inside of video games? Sounds like a weird combo, right? But trust me, it's far from it, because apparently when you combine photography in video games, you get magic. A lot of modern day video games now come with a feature called photo mode, which is basically a mode where you get to break away from the gameplay for a second and take pictures of anything inside of the game. It can be anything too, like the beautiful scenery, the characters you're playing, or any funny moments you want to show to your friends. And according to this article I found from Gamerant, this feature didn't start popularizing until Sucker Punch's infamous Second Son introduced it back in 2014. Which, side note, that's a really good game, I recommend it. And ever since, at least on the PlayStation side of things, games seem to really love this photo feature, adapting this idea into what seems to be every exclusive afterwards. Like The Last of Us 2 had it, Horizon Zero Dawn had it, God of War had it, even Ghost of Tsushima had it, and that was a necessity because that game was pretty as fuck. I mean, look at these pictures I took during my first playthrough of that game some years ago. The landscapes make me wish I was actually there in Japan, but if I were, I'd probably get sliced in half during that era. So fast forward to today, it seems Sony is still following that trend of publishing games that all have a photo mode. And the latest hotness that just came out about a month ago is Insomniac's Spider-Man 2, which in my opinion has one of the best photo modes I've ever used, and that's honestly no exaggeration. Even if I were to bring up the list from Gamerant about the games with the best photo modes, having played and beat 7 of the 9 of those, I'd say Insomniac still somehow comes out on top of having the best photo mode. It's really because of one simple implementation that literally gives it the edge over the other games. It has something I haven't seen in any of the video games photo modes yet, or at least my first exposure to it was Spider-Man Miles Morales. But what makes them stand out is the inclusion of a lighting system. In all 3 of Insomniac Spider-Man games, they include a 3-point lighting system into their photo mode that allows you to place 3 digital lights into your shots and light your scene as you please. And that right there is a single thing that makes it a game changer for me. It is a single factor that can turn in-game snapshots from average to fantastic. And as any pro photographer will tell you, lighting is one of the most important things to implement into any shot. Of course, this game is already visually stunning, so it's kind of hard to take a bad photo, but being able to place color and shape lights onto any frame you happen to press pause on really can upgrade your captures. Like here's an example of a picture I took inside of the actual game. Just look at the before and after here. You can see how just placing a couple of lights and tweaking the exposure really made the difference. It's kind of stunning. And that brings me to my main point. It's because of that right there that I can confidently say that we now live in a time where you can be a photographer without even having to leave the comfort of your own couch. You don't even need to own a camera. You can legit practice photography just using games like Spider-Man 2 in their photo mode. So now you get it, right? Like, Spider-Man 2's photo mode is great because of some lights, but let's try putting it into practice. What I wanted to do today was dive a little deeper into how you can actually use the lighting feature to take some great snapshots. But if we're gonna dive deeper into this, I feel like I need to explain something first, and that's the basics of how actual lighting works in actual photography. So follow me to my makeshift amateur home studio. So, I'm not a photographer, but I did do videography during my time back then. So I do know that lighting is one of the most important aspects to really getting a good image. Like, you can really use lighting to shape your subject, you can use it to create mood, you can change the colors, you can really just control your image. And not to mention, you need lights to actually see. But what I wanna do right now is show you this really basic technique called 3-point lighting, where you can light any subject, any person only using 3 lights. And to demonstrate this, I got my lovely wife, Yvonne, to model for us while I set up the 3 LED panels that I have to just show you what the setup's supposed to look like, which is like this. We already did it. I'm placing the throne.
Oh yeah.
Try sitting down now.
Like this?
Yeah, you see? And then like if I just zoom in like this. Now, there's plenty types of lights. You don't have to use LEDs, it's just all I had, but they're great because they're dimmable. They can shift tones between warm and cool, and they don't get hot. All right, let me see if I remember what they taught me in film school. Okay, 3-point lighting consists of 3 components: your key light, fill light, and rim/backlight. I'll show you how each is positioned and what they are doing to the subject. The key light is your main light source and should be one of the brightest lights you have. Placing it at about a 45-degree angle allows for contrast to show across your subject's face while still serving as the main light that illuminates them. If you look at her face, you'll see half of it is in shadow and the other half we can actually see. That light and dark difference is what we call contrast, which is the light's natural way of showing the object's shape. This type of contrast might not even be what we want here. We want to go for something more brighter, so we need a fill light, which is placed 45 degrees from the subject again, but on the opposite side of your key light. Its purpose is basically to hit the shadows that your key light created and fill that in, allowing you to control the overall lighting contrast of your overall shot, or the lighting ratio if you want to use the professional term. Having a fill light either brighter, on par, or darker than your key allows for all different types of looks, so you should experiment. And last but not least is your rim light or backlight, which you place behind your subject to hit their hair or back to outline their profile with some light. This creates a little shine on their hair and body outline that allows you to show the shape of your subject and to make them pop from the background a bit. And then when you put them all together, you get this. A fully lit subject that looks more stylish than just simply having your ceiling lights on. And when you compare the before and after, you can truly see how far just setting up 3 simple lights can take your image. It's quite literally the difference between an amateur and a professional looking shot. And I'm not even really the best at lighting. And this is only just one way on how you can light your subject. And as far as I know, it's one of the first ways they teach beginners when they first teach about lighting. And you can use it to light anyone in anything. It doesn't only have to be somebody sitting in front of a black backdrop like this. For instance, you can use it in a fun living room photo shoot with your wife. Okay, so now we know the basics of lighting, how it can transform your pictures, all that good stuff, cool. But let's reel it back into talking about Spider-Man, because it's my belief that that lighting technique I just showed you out there in a real photo session, you can also do in Spider-Man 2's photo mode. And again, it's simply because they have a lighting system that you can play around with, something other games simply don't have, or at least not a lot of them. And to demonstrate how it works in the game, I've messed around with Spider-Man's photo mode and its lights and took a lot of photos. But let's dive deeper into how photo mode actually works. Okay, if you haven't played this masterpiece of a game, you're missing out. But while you're playing, at any point in time, you can get into photo mode by simply pressing start and clicking it in the start menu. Look, it's right there. And once you're in there, everything freezes. Time stops. I guess Dio's at it again. And you'll notice with everything frozen, when you try to move, the camera is the only thing that does, allowing you to float around and search for your shot. And if for some reason Spider-Man isn't doing the exact action you want, you can always exit and reopen photo mode to get whatever action that you actually want. For example, try doing a finisher, pause it, and go into photo mode during that animation. You can get some cool action shots that way. Once you're in, you'll also notice the settings are in the corner, which is broken down into 2 tabs. The top one focuses on the different aspects of the scene you can control, so like the camera, character, lights, and stickers. And it always starts in the camera mode at default. The bottom tab dives deeper into each of these modes, which if you look, they pretty much have a lot of the settings you find on an actual camera, like exposure, aperture is an actual setting, which may look intimidating to those new to photo mode and photography in general, but let's just take this one step at a time. time here. I recommend starting with moving the camera around and finding your shot. In the camera type setting, you can choose to either roam freely or orbit around Spider-Man, but use whatever is easiest for you, I'd say. I just usually roam around freely. And while you move around to find your angle, also use the field of view setting, which is basically the zoom. It is found by pressing R1 in the lens tab and is the equivalent of spinning your lens focal length ring on an actual camera. And if you look, this tilt setting allows you to rotate the frame, which is useful if you're going for a stylish Dutch angle or just simply a portrait. Then once you have your angle, I'd recommend just going right into tuning your lighting by first turning down the exposure, because by default this game is actually kind of bright, especially during the day, which doesn't really allow for much lighting contrast since everything's bright. But to get more contrast, I usually start by dropping down the overall exposure with the slider. Obviously when you do that, the picture is too dark. That's where the actual light sources come in. Now you have room to control where you want the bright parts of your photo to be and really take control of the lighting here, which again allows for some really nice photos compared to other video games that don't have a lighting system. Again, you can switch to the lighting tab by pressing square, where you can activate up to 3 lights and even manipulate the natural light, which is just the sun and the moon. Manipulating them allows you to use them as a 4th practical light that you actually see in the picture. And manipulating the natural light is actually pretty useful, especially during sunset and nighttime. For example, this swinging shot I took of Miles is fun because I used the sun to create a background gradient of sorts. And I can attribute that to the fact that I was just able to simply move it right behind him. After that, I lit it the same way I usually do with all my other shots, you know, with the rim light to the left, key light to the right side of him, and the lowered exposure, and that was mainly it for lighting him here. But to get that gradient spotlight look you're seeing, I also added a vignette to add a black round border on the edges. Vignetting is a cool technique to control where you want the audience's eyes to instantly go as soon as they see it, and in this case it hones in on Miles by darkening the edges and leaving him to be the brightest thing here. I usually add a vignette as like my secret sauce of sorts into all of my pictures, so I'd recommend playing around with that and adding it to yours too. In this level you play as Venom in the nighttime, right? And I started off lighting this picture by first moving around the moon's natural light, and by simply just rotating it, it was providing a nice backlight on the background. Now if I go back, I'll have access to the 3 lights. To turn any of them on, you just select them with X and then bam, you're lit. And you'll instantly see all of the lighting settings you have available too. You have 2 types of lights. You have a sphere light and a spotlight, which you can kind of get the idea of what each one does just by how the game visualizes both. I usually am able to get away with just using sphere lights, but choose whatever works for your vision. And the controls on how to move the light around is at the bottom too. You pretty much have full access to move it anywhere you want, but it will stick to orbiting around the character, making it easy to move around without actually losing track of it. And at this point, you can just use your artistic eye and lighting knowledge to place each light to tune in the look of your picture. You place them, mess around with the settings for each light, and after some time, you'll be ready to snapshot. And since we lowered the overall exposure, you might have to raise the intensity of the lights to compensate, but when you do, you'll see that you really have more control on shaping the image than you did with the default brightness setting. For example, if you were to find a random NPC and implement the 3-point lighting technique we talked about earlier, you can take portraits of random characters. Everyone can get a headshot. Try giving an NPC a key, fill, and rim light, and you too can call yourself a professional virtual photographer now. Or instead of NPCs, you can snap pictures of actual main characters. Like take this picture I took of Black Cat. To light this, I just used the 3-point lighting method like we've been using. So I brought down the camera exposure and blurred the background to black it out as much as possible. I then gave her a key light to hit the right side of her face, an orange rim light to hit the left side of her face, and then a fill light to really subtly brighten the rest of her face. And then, before you have it, she has a portrait. And if you really want to go crazy, you can take headshots of every single main character if you really want to. Look at these other ones I took of Miles, Peter, and MJ. They have headshots now, cool. And this one I took of Spider-Man Noir solving a Rubik's Cube. Turned out really cool too, and again was lit in a similar way. I had to have him jump off a really tall building in mid-air to get this Rubik's Cube animation. But lighting it was similar to the other portrait shot. Lower the exposure, black out the background, have an edge light shine the left edge of his hat and silhouette. The key light, again, being the brightest, highlights the Rubik's Cube in his hands, and the last fill light just fills in everything else so he doesn't completely go into darkness. and then boom, you get this. Here's another good example, just with 2 lights instead. I started by dropping down the exposure and controlled the lighting to give Spidey a motivated rim light on the right side of it, to make it look like it was coming from the moon from behind. And then I gave him a key light on the left side so we can actually see him. This was my final look. And as I mentioned before, you can use the 4th natural light to help light your scene. The main difference being this is a physical light, so you'll actually see it in the shot. But you can use that to your advantage. Like in this nighttime shot of Peter, I use the moon's natural light as a practical light, but it's also illuminating the entire street behind him, creating sort of a cool backlighting look. You can mess around with the intensity and elevation sliders to set the correct brightness and height respectively. But by itself, you see that Spider-Man is silhouetted, so now I just need, you guessed it, a key light to light the front side of him, and all of a sudden, I have my look. Here's another example I did with Venom. And this one was interesting because the only change I actually did was move the moon's natural light source to explore some additional lighting options. This part of the game already had a lot of colorful Times Square billboards lighting him already. So I simply found my angle, lowered the exposure, and messed around with the moon lighting to settle on something that was mixing the red coming from the environment and the bluish spotlight coming from the moon to give me a colorful type of picture here. To be honest, it's hard to get any bad shots of Venom in this scene because he's just so sick. So,
you know what? Here go 2 more for y'all.
Here's 2 more examples, but this time I'm using the sun as a practical light source. It gives a fun little lens flare when you see it, giving it a cinematic type of look. I even have Spider-Man touching the sun in this one, which you can also do by changing his pose in the character tab. It allows you to choose from a variety of poses and facial expressions to alter the action in this picture. I'd recommend playing around with those if it fits your vision. I also loved how these pictures turned out. These pictures gave a really dark mood, which actually does fit this part of the story. This is a really good example on how lowering the exposure and controlling the lighting really changed the mood for the resulting shot. Because initially this scene actually was kind of bright, it was just kind of cloudy, but it turned way more dark and sinister at the end by just changing some exposure and lighting settings. It looks like it's actually nighttime here. Also worth noting, to get a photo in this portrait orientation, you have to use the tilt setting to rotate the picture a full 90 degrees and then just snapshot it like that. That way you can just rotate the snapshot back later and then all of a sudden you have your full res portrait oriented picture. You can also switch Spider-Man costumes in photo mode to experiment with different looks, like I did in this one. I took a few different variations. Here's some more screenshots I took using all of the same techniques and ideas. The artists over at Insomniac did a fantastic job with the fidelity of this game, and with every 3D asset being so insanely detailed, it's kinda hard to take a bad photo. Everything looks so good already by default. And pretty much all of the photo mode features found in Spider-Man 2 were also in their previous 2 titles as well. And as you may have guessed, I also used the photo mode in Miles Morales a lot when it came out. And when I say a lot, I mean a lot. I was obsessed with it, mostly because it was my first time experiencing their lighting system. It even gave me an idea to use it to do a fun little experiment and try to recreate the Star Wars Disney intro where they spin a light around to reveal different characters. So I decided to try to do that in-game with different Miles Morales costumes. I even recreated the Miles Morales title in 3D as a little cherry on the top. I made a YouTube video about it. You can check it out in the description below. To be honest, I can probably even do a better job at this experiment because the game looks even better now. But the photo system is great in all of these games. Just check out these shots I took in the PS5 version of Miles Morales. Same tips used, same lighting techniques, same tools. I just decided to be more action-centric with these shots, like this one. This one was fun because the vibe really did change between the actual in-game scene and the resulting picture. Reducing the exposure and ambient light in the natural light settings really changed the tone of the scene as a whole, from a warm type of look to a really cool look. And I was able to use the rest of the lights to backlight the back wall to highlight Spider-Man's silhouette and give the enemy on the right a purple rim light shine to match her cyborg outfit. Same with the second picture. Notice the red rim light shine on the enemy's chin. That was intentional, just to add color into the picture. Don't neglect the idea of adding some color to your lights to add some of that extra design element. That's a highly overlooked tip. Here's an even better example, and probably my favorite picture I've taken in this entire video. A lot was working well in this photo. Even starting with the initial action of doing a strike takedown on a guard. The impact creates a small smoke explosion, which I used a red light to really illuminate. Add a rim light above him, and then bam, I had my final image. I even made a variation where I added a blue light just to see what it would look like, and I love both of these pictures. There is one last thing to note, and it's a feature that seems to exist in Miles Morales, but not in the Spider-Man 2 game. You obviously notice a foggy ambience in these shots, right? And if you look back at the previous action shots, you'll notice the snowy element is in there. This game does indeed allow you to change the weather and the time of day in the settings, meaning at any point in time you can make it sunset, you can make it snow, or you can just make it foggy for a hazy cool smoke effect type of shot like I did here. And that feature right there is yet another game changer for photo mode. And probably why I would actually say Miles Morales is the superior photo mode by just a little bit. I have a feeling they'll add it later into Spider-Man 2, considering it just came out and doesn't even have a new game plus yet. But imagine having the ability to take nighttime Venom shots whenever you want. As of now though, you can only do that when the story warrants a nighttime setting. So as of now, if you want to always have access to the different times of day for photos, I'd recommend creating multiple save files when it's those times into the story and having those saves ready for whenever you want to load them up. And I've just been showing what I've personally captured. There's a whole virtual photography community online exploring what's actually possible when taking photos in these video games. Like, just check out these awesome shots that users from the virtual photography community are taking. They are extremely talented at this virtual photography stuff and probably even better at taking photos than me. They're all awesome. So, there you have it. I hope I not only convinced you how sick Insomniac Spider-Man's photo mode is, but how with all the features it gives you access to, it really serves as another option for artists to really flex their photographic eye. And all without even owning any actual camera of sorts. We live in a crazy time, I swear. I also wanted to use this video as an excuse to just geek out over cinematic lighting techniques. I just really think lighting for photo and film is just like an interesting art in and of itself. I just love the idea of it being accessible to everyone through video games. Lighting is truly crucial to the final look of any art piece, and I'm not just talking about photographs. I'm talking about all of art in general, 3D art, paintings, you name it. If you compare the before and afters of some of the shots I did in this photo mode, you really can see how crazy of a transformation the pics went through by just tweaking some lighting settings and placing lights here and there. And if that doesn't convince you, some of the actual developers from Insomniac who focused specifically on the game's lighting posted their own before and after lighting video where they show you what some of the cutscenes look like before and after they lit them. And that's what really inspired me to even make this video in the first place. If it wasn't for artists over at Insomniac, the game wouldn't look like the cinematic movie we just so happen to be playing on a PlayStation. If you want to check out their before and after video, I'll link them in the description. They are super talented. And now, it's your turn. For any Spider-Man fans that happen to make it this far into the video, I want you to show me some of your shots. I challenge all of you to go into photo mode and unleash your inner photographer. I promise you'll be surprised at how gnarly some of the shots you get are. And if you want to share any of them, show me on Twitter. I'd love to see them. And I'm always on there just like mindlessly doom scrolling because I'm chronically online. That's all I got. I'm hoping if this doesn't inspire anyone to buy a $3,000 DSLR camera, it'll at least convince some of you to give photo mode a go. It's super awesome what video games are doing nowadays. But that's pretty much it for me and my virtual photography endeavors. Now it's about time for Christmas, and to start the new year, I have to figure out if I can finally finish my next project where I create an entire 3D animated film without actually animating anything. I swear it should be possible, but I just need to actually do it. But until I do, enjoy the holidays, y'all. I'll see you on the next one.